I rise to lead for the Liberal Party on the Game and Feral Animal Legislation Amendment Conservation Hunting Bill 2025. The Liberal opposition stands firmly against this legislation. This bill is not about conservation. It is not about managing invasive species. It is a political deal, one that seeks to recast recreational hunting as an environmental policy. It is a dangerous and disingenuous piece of legislation that risks public safety, undermines confidence in our firearms framework, and reverses decades of progress since the Port Arthur tragedy. There are claims this bill recognises the role of hunting in managing feral animals. The bill in its current form, in truth, enshrines a statutory right to hunt, creates a taxpayer-funded conservation hunting authority, and opens Crown land to armed recreational activity without community consent or scientific oversight. None of that delivers measurable conservation benefit. Let's be very clear. Firearm ownership in Australia is not a right. It is a privilege, granted under licence and subject to the overriding principle of public safety. That principle has guided our state since the introduction of the National Firearms Agreement in 1996. This bill seeks to dismantle that understanding by embedding rights-based language into New South Wales law. The very language our predecessors agreed must never happen again. But don't take my word for it. Let's go back in history. Let's learn from the Game Council of New South Wales, which was created in 2002 as a result of a political horse trading. The Shooters and Fishers Party, holding the balance of power in the upper house, demanded it as a price for legislative support. Mr. Robert Brown, a member of this House, was its former chair. The Game Council was given an extraordinary dual role: to represent hunters and regulate them, a clear and dangerous conflict of interest. A decade later, in 2013, the government commissioned Steve Dunn, a respected former senior public servant, to conduct an independent review. His findings were damning. Public safety does not receive a high level of attention in planning documents. There is an inherent conflict of interest between representing hunters and regulating their activities. Allowing the Game Council to continue on its current path is not an option. He found that more than 10 years after its creation, the Council still had no governance framework, no risk strategy, no internal compliance system, and no published strategic plan. And when that review was underway, senior executives of the Game Council were under police investigation for using a government vehicle to engage in unauthorised hunting, crossing into a national park and discharging firearms. One was later convicted of multiple gun and hunting offences. As a result, the government suspended all amateur hunting in state forests. The Game Council was abolished. Its regulatory powers were transferred back to the Department of Primary Industries. Oversight returned to the hands of government, not lobbyists. So why, with full knowledge of that history, would this government introduce a bill that restores a statutory authority dominated by hunting interests, establishes a Minister for Hunting, and grants a right to hunt in law? Let's call this what it is, the Games Council 2.0, a rebrand of a failed institution that Parliament had to dismantle to protect the public. Even Environment Minister at the time, Robin Parker, of the 2013 scandal, insisted on tight controls for hunting in national parks. There were no hunting during school holidays, no hunting without full supervision, no children under 18, no bows, no black powder weapons, parks closed to visitors during hunts. Why? Because public safety matters. Today, this government proposes opening Crown land to hunting with far weaker protections and without any comparable trial period or safeguards. That is not a lesson learned, that is a lesson forgotten. The inquiry had received over 615 submissions. The weight of evidence is against this bill. Lucy's project, Domestic Violence New South Wales, No to Violence and People with a Disability Australia and Full Stop Australia warned, firearms in domestic and family violence contexts significantly increase the risk of harm and lethality to victim survivors. Introducing a right to hunt may legitimise firearms and embolden perpetrators. Full Stop Australia added, the bill risks putting firearms into the hands of those subject to family violence orders. Many women and children are killed or seriously harmed by intimate partners with gun access. These are not abstract fears. In rural communities, access to firearms is already a risk factor for family violence. Normalising gun use under a right to hunt will not make families safer. The Ilana and Madeline Foundation went further, warning that this is the most regressive firearms legislation proposed since 1996. It undermines the spirit of the National Firearms Agreement and ignores firearms safety. The RSPCA reminded the committee that the bill contains no requirement for humane practice, no monitoring, and no measurable conservation outcomes. They stated plainly, the bill has nothing to do with evidence-based pest control. The Invasive Species Council, who actually support effective feral animal control, said, this legislation is a political project, not an environmental one. It provides no scientific rationale for hunting as a conservation tool. And the Biodiversity Council warned that uncontrolled shooting may in fact worsen ecosystem outcomes by dispersing pest populations and interfering with coordinated control programs. Gun Control Australia described it as a Trojan horse for expanding gun access and weakening community safeguards. When domestic violence advocates, child safety foundations, conservation scientists, animal welfare organisations and governance experts are all united in opposition, Parliament should listen. We are not alone in opposing this bill. Conservation experts across New South Wales have condemned it in the strongest terms. The National Parks Association of New South Wales, a highly respected voice for biodiversity and public land protection, has sounded the alarm. Their CEO, Gary Dunnett, was unequivocal. This bill, introduced by Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party MLC Robert Borsak, is nothing more than a rebranded version of the discredited Games Council, which was abolished in 2013 following serious governance concerns. He went further. It is deeply disappointing that the New South Wales government appears to be buying into the myth that recreational hunting is an effective way of controlling the feral animal crisis impacting our biodiversity. And we agree, recreational hunting has its place, but it is not the silver bullet for managing invasive species across vast landscapes. The claim that this bill represents a conservation strategy is misleading. Mr Dunnett concluded the ill-named Conservation Hunting Authority isn't about eradicating damaging feral animals. It will simply follow the same path as its predecessor and impede genuine conservation action. Let's be clear, professional land managers, environmental scientists and pest control specialists use evidence-based techniques, baiting, trapping, targeted culling and where appropriate, aerial shooting. They do so under strict protocols, not on weekends for sport. The bill confuses recreation with conservation, and that confusion puts our native species at risk. This bill would establish a conservation hunting authority dominated by hunting interests. With a direct advisory line to a new Minister for Hunting, it would remove the Department of Primary Industries from its regulatory role, replacing it with a lobby-driven board whose purpose is to advance hunting, not environmental protection. This is not good governance, this is regulatory capture. It also allows Crown land to be declared open to hunting without consultation. That includes land used by families, bushwalkers and First Nations communities. It is unsafe, it is unaccountable, and it is unnecessary. I want to spend a few more moments addressing the governance structure proposed in this bill. The bill creates this statutory body, but it fails to answer basic questions. Who will provide independent oversight? How will conflicts of interest be managed? Will the authority be required to share firearm information with police and courts, especially in the context of AVOs? What complaint and appeal mechanisms are in place for decisions that affect safety, community use, or animal welfare? The original Game Council failed on all these fronts, and this new body risks repeating every single mistake. If this bill had appeared in the 1980s, it might have been debated as a bold experiment in community-led feral animal management. But in 2025, it feels tone deaf, out of step with modern expectations around governance, environmental protection and safety. This bill does not reflect contemporary conservation science, modern best practice, nor the community's expectation of transparency, rigour and independence. It instead takes us back to a structure that was rejected by the Parliament, the public and even by government after its litany of failures. Another issue raised in the submissions was the expansion of hunting on public lands, including national parks and nature reserves. This has historically been one of the most controversial policies in New South Wales and introduced as a part of a deal between Shooters Party and government in exchange for support on unrelated legislation. The public rightly raised concerns then, and those concerns remain today. Who is liable if someone is shot or injured? How are non-hunting users, hikers, families, bird watchers protected? What happens to the cultural heritage sites, particularly Aboriginal heritage areas? The answer from this bill? Silence. It is policy by omission, leaving the dangerous details for others to sort out. There is something deeply frustrating and frankly dangerous about legislation that seeks to revive a failed model without addressing why it failed. It shows disregard for the public servants and inquiry officers who expose the failures, the communities affected by those failures, and the experts who have built evidence-based solutions to the very problems this bill claims to address. One submission to the bill put it well. This bill is not about invasive species, it is about ideology. That may be blunt, but it's not wrong. We in the opposition oppose this bill because we believe conservation should be science-led, not politically led. Firearm and hunting licences must be rigorously regulated. Public safety should be paramount, especially for women and children. Governance must be transparent and with clear accountability to the Parliament and the public. We believe in effective, evidence-based feral animal control, not the romanticised rebranding of its failed institutions. And we say to this House, we've seen this movie before and we know how it ends. In closing, I say this: the Parliament has a duty to remember the lessons of our past and to legislate for a better future. We do not need another Game Council. We do not need another scandal, and we do not need another system where safety is compromised and accountability is optional. We need robust, integrated pest control. We need strong protections for women, and we need laws that reflect the values and evidence of 2025, not 2002. For these reasons, the opposition will vote against the game and feral animal legislation, and we urge every member of this House to do the same.